Welcome back to Living with Parkinson's, the good, the bad, and the reality. And I'm Bryce. And if you're new here, this podcast is all about real and honest conversations about life with Parkinson's. I talk about the good, the bad, and most importantly, the reality of what it's like living with this diagnosis. So, last episode, I shared my personal journey and my diagnosis, what it's been like living with Parkinson's and how it's changed my life. And honestly, I was blown away by the response. It absolutely, the comments, the messages, the support, it reminded me of why I started to do this in the first place. So thank you for that. I really, really appreciate it. So today we want to talk about something that's every single person with Parkinson's has to face, and that's change. This disease forces us to stop doing certain things and change how we do others and adapt in ways that we never expected. So this episode, I'm going to share what I've had to stop, change, what I've had to adapt since my diagnosis, and how I've learned to move forward despite the challenges. It's all about change, and things that we have to stop doing. We can't. It's hard. It's hard to stop doing things that we don't want to do. It's really, really tough. So I tried to think of some things that I've completely had to stop. And then something hit me, like the biggest one by far was probably leaving my job. In 2020, my work, the travel, the responsibilities just became overwhelming to me. Uh, they became too much. I tried to push through for as long as I could, but at some point, you have to actually stop and be honest with yourself, right? So I had to stop and be honest with myself. It just wasn't sustainable anymore. And that was really, really, really hard. For years, my career was such a huge part of my identity and probably was most of my identity, to be honest with you. And then suddenly it's just gone. And you have to figure out, I had to figure out, you know, what to do. What does that mean? And what's next? And, the reality is for me personally, I got diagnosed at 40 in 2010. And so 2010, I got diagnosed at 40. Yeah, 2020. Huh. It's almost 15 years ago. It's incredible. Anyway, so about 10 years after diagnosis, so about 2020 is when that reality hit me. And I had a job with a lot of responsibilities, and I traveled a lot. And I was realizing that I'd get off the plane, I'd drive home, and literally hit the couch, uh, trying to think about what I was going to eat because I was so hungry, and then fall asleep. And I literally would be on that couch. Oops. I'd literally be on that couch, sometimes even for a day. Like I couldn't get off. I was exhausted. I was just totally burnt out. So I realized the trips and the travel and the stress and everything that comes along with that was really, really, really starting to just knock me out. Right? They became longer. In the old days, um, you know, not everybody, a lot of people struggle with jet lag, and you're tired after a trip, and that's a normal tired, right? But this was becoming where it just kept getting like longer and longer and longer, was like my recovery time to kind of get back to whatever I considered normal. And I had a young family at this time, and if my kids are listening or watching, they're going to say, oh, we weren't that young, Dad. But they were younger, and I had to face reality. I didn't want to, and I hope this really makes sense to you, and hopefully, like, just to take this one to the bank. I didn't want the best of me and Parkinson's to be at work, and then my family, my kids got the worst of me, if that makes sense. So, I was on. How you get on. You have to be up and on to do the things that you want to do. Um, I wanted to be on. I had to be on. At work, right? I had to be present. I had to be excited and passionate. And so I had to I expanded all my energy within those 8 to 10 hours a day, or however long it was going to be that day, and then come home and just flop on the couch or be so exhausted I barely get food into me, and then just have to go lie down. And so I had to look at that and say I wanted my family, I wanted my kids to have. At the time, I kept thinking, I don't know how much longer I have before I'm going to be able to not do a lot of other things that I currently do, and I didn't want those times to be robbed. So I got to that point where the job was outweighing my family, right? Family, and so I had to make that decision. It was a decision, and I know it's a hard decision because you have to grapple with a lot of things. You had to look at finances and career, and is it time? Do I have enough time to not work? And honestly, I was younger, and the truth of the matter is, it felt really weird to me because I, I didn't feel sick enough. If that's a horrible word, but I didn't feel sick enough to stop working. You know, I could still get by. I could still do it. I could still, uh, you know, fake it till I made it. I guess if that's they used to say that, but I could still do it. And I just felt like I'm too young and to stop working. And what are people going to think? And do I have enough money and whatnot? And I realized at the time, no, I didn't have enough money to retire, and I knew it was too young, and I still wanted to be productive. So, uh, but those decisions and those times in life where you have to make these gut wrenching, what you feel at the time are just gut wrenching decisions like this. This is going to be whatever I decide is going to change and alter the course of my life. And sometimes they do, but I have this inner belief, I guess, maybe it's just me, but I believe sometimes when you step out and you make a decision for the right reasons, uh, it's like you're rewarded for it. And, within about a year after I semi-retired or quit, left my career, my job, um, my life changed again ultimately for so much better, and I'm so happy with where I am today. So I feel like I was kind of rewarded for that. So um, it's a big deal, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute here. So just hold on to that. We'll get to there when we get to there. So that was a major life decision for me that I had to decide at that moment, and I did, and it took that time. So that was big, and I thought at the time like that was going to be like the biggest thing that was going to happen to me, for a few years. And then about a year later, I went through a divorce after 27 years of marriage. And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I'll say this, that Parkinson's does affect relationships, and it affects them in ways that you don't even expect it. So you have to change with the dynamics and the future that we're going to have. And sometimes despite our best efforts, they just don't work out. And so that was a tough period for me. But looking back, I can see it as part of the journey. And I'm not blaming Parkinson's for it at all. Obviously, there was probably other things that were, there was other things that were going on. But the reality of Parkinson's and that diagnosis and that fear of the future and what was going to happen probably weighed a lot into um, that final decision. Yeah. So anyway, so I thought that the job thing was going to be the major thing for a few years, and it turns out that it was quite minor, actually, to be honest. And anyway, so there were other things that I had to let go too, spontaneity. Because now I have to plan my days around my medication and my energy levels. Some of the hobbies and things that I used to do, they just don't let me do it the way I used to. And I don't know. I'm really competitive, so um, things like golf, which I really really enjoy. I was getting to a point where, after about 9 holes, I was really exhausted. My feet was like it was like pulling cement blocks with me as I was trying to walk, and um, I felt like I was being punished when I had to try to have fun. So I go and play golf, and for 2 days later, like for the next 2 days after I golfed for 2 whole days, I ached. It was just like awful. And everything hurt. My back hurt. My legs hurt. My butt hurt. My shoulders hurt. You name it, it hurt. And it got to the point where was that worth it? So, I had to modify the way I did that. I had to maybe cut back. I cut back from 18 holes to 9 holes. Taking a cart more often than I wanted to, and sort of modify, my expectations of myself in a way. And that's one thing you really have to look at is, we set the highest expectations for ourselves than anybody does. And sometimes we set them so high, they're hard to attain and they're hard to live up to. So I had to kind of really look at it and say, and it's funny, I don't use PD as an excuse for a lot of things, but sometimes we do have that PD card though, right? Like, as a joke, my wife will say something will say something, and um, you forgot to you forgot to take the garbage out last night, and why did you forget that? And now we have to wait a week for the garbage, and she's I love her, don't get me wrong, she's not nagging, she's just like, what happened? You said you were going to take it out, and you didn't take it out. Well, you know how Parkinson's goes sometimes, and your mind just slips or gets focused on one thing, and you can't multitask that well and as good as you used to, which is another change that you have to adapt to. But sometimes I'll just look at her and I'll just say, well, honey, I don't know if you realize this, but I do have a brain disorder, and it's progressive, and there's no cure for it. And sometimes it affects the way I do things and think. And so you can imagine the reaction I get on that. Yes, It's in ITs and it's fun and we have a good time with that. But anyway, so those are another things that you have to adapt and change. And this change thing is it's like my goodness, what's going to have to change today? And that's the one thing that wherever you are on this journey, if you've just been diagnosed and just starting out, or maybe you've been it's for me it's been 15 years now on this journey, and if you're for those listening or watching, maybe it's been longer for you, maybe it's in between, it doesn't matter. um, you have to become a change agent and you have to be okay with it because every day can be different, right? Everything's changing. And I don't know about you, but one of my famous lines with at my 6 month checkup, my 6 month appointment with my doctor is always, I take my little list in of things that are different, things that have happened over the 6 months, how my medication's reacting to my body, how my off times are, how long my medication's lasting. I keep a diary of all of that. And we go into the doctor's office. My wife and I will go in every 6 months. And well, I should say sometimes I feel like it's, uh, my wife's name's Carmen. It feels like Carmen and my doctor are having an appointment. I'm just sitting there. She discusses everything that I'm going through. So, and bless her for that. She's a great care partner. So anyway, but we'll go through that. And my biggest question always is like, is this? I'll say like, hey, this is happening now, but I don't know if it's Parkinson's or if it's just old age. And he'll go like, that one's old age. I'm like, okay, great. Let's track that up to old age. He goes, no, that's part of the Parkinson's. And now what are we going to do to try to either see if we can modify my mindset around it or modify, adapt to the change. And that's the one big thing is when I say you have to be a change agent, you have to be able to deal with the change. There's a lot of things you don't have to just change. When I say change, it doesn't mean like stop, right? And I think a lot of people think that sometimes they think change means stop. And maybe there are some things that you have to stop, for the betterment of you or the betterment of prolonging the symptoms of this disease. But change doesn't mean stop. Change means adapting. Change means kind of turning and going in a direction or modifying the way you have to do it. So I would challenge you, if there's things that you've just stopped doing, hey, I got diagnosed with Parkinson's, I have to stop, right? um, I've heard a lot of stories where people just stopped working. I've got diagnosed and I stopped working because I had Parkinson's, and it's 10 years later, and they're kind of going like, "My goodness, I could have still been working." And and then again, there's some that have to. So I'm not trying to, excuse me, I'm not trying to put anybody in a box, but I just want you to think about, when something is different, right? Change most of the time means adapting or adjusting the way we do it. So one of the things that I hate and I had to adjust to, and I'll be honest with you, I call this the good, the bad, and the reality. And you know what I actually hate? I hate that my life revolves around 3 hour increments. It actually frustrates me, that you wake up in the morning, pre-diagnosis or, and again, please no offense, but I always say like normal, before this came on. And, you'd get up in the morning and you'd think about your day and, you think about the end, start of the day. Hey, I've got to do all this, and this today. And at the end, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go to bed. Right. Where now my life, revolves around this 3 hour cycle of my medication. So it's like I wake up, I take my medication first thing, and which is always fun because I can't really do it that well in the morning. When my worst for me, and my symptoms are in the morning. And if you're curious or not, and some people said, "Boy, you look so good." Um, can't believe you don't have Parkinson's. I can't believe you have Parkinson's. Sorry, I can't. Oh my God, can't believe you have Parkinson's. It's like when you're seeing me right now on camera, you're seeing me at my best. I mean, I've got my medications down pat. I'm not silly. I don't just, try to do it when I know I'm going to be in an off period or if I'm having a bad day or a very, very slow day. But my predominant symptoms are the stiffness, the soreness, and slowness and balance. I do have tremors. I have a tremor on both sides, predominantly my right side, my right foot, my right hand. Um, you know, and sometimes I think that I'm strong enough to ward them away, but that stiffness and the stiffness and the soreness and whatnot in the morning is just unbelievable. So, I can't open my pills in the morning. So I either have to have them preset or my wife, feeds them to me. Uh, but, and then 20, 30 minutes later, I'm ready to go and I can start getting up and slowly moving into my day. Cause even then it takes us that slow movement. It's like kind of just getting going. And if you've seen any of my other stuff, I always say that I liken it to the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz, where he's, at the beginning of the movie, he's just standing there stiff, just stuck and stiff, and then Dorothy, I think it was Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz, yeah, I think so. If I'm wrong, put in the comments what the real name was, but I think it was Dorothy. Anyway, she starts squirting the oil can, and he slowly starts to he starts moving that oil around, and finally gets out of that, and he gets into the zone of like, okay, now I can move, and that's kind of exactly what it feels like for me. Anyway, in the morning, so. But anyway, from that moment on, so if I get up at 6 a.m., then I know that my timers on my phone, my timers on my watch, my timers on my smart devices are all going to be hammering down in 3 hours. They're all going to go off. So my house is like lights up. Everything, my phones go off. Everything goes off at 3 hours because I got to take that next dose of medication. And so, and then it's 3 hours from then, and it's 3 hours from then, and it's 3 hours from then. So there's a lot of planning that we have to go through. And that is, I mean, let's be honest. Let's just be straight honest. It stinks. Like, I hate it. I hate to say that I have to plan that around. So, like I said, even like filming this video, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna film a podcast today. I'm gonna record something today. Then I have to think about, I can't just randomly, spontaneously do it like I maybe could have done in the past. I have to stop and go, okay, what time do I want to do it? What time are my meds? Blah blah blah. So I'm usually, 20 minutes after my medication is probably the best time, my best on time. So I plan accordingly, and so that stinks, right? But you know what? It stinks, but it's doable. And so there's a lot of times we can start feeling sorry for ourselves, and we can start isolating, and we can start kind of getting cranky and mad and upset and everything else. But the reality is what it is. And some people are worse off than us, and some people are better than us, but it doesn't matter. And the reality is that you want to live your life to the best of your ability. So I encourage you to do that. And I've been asked so many times about my medication, like when do I take it? What am I taking? How do I take it? How do I plan around my meals or what I'm eating? Or do I take it with, coffee or water or alcohol? It doesn't matter. And so I did a webinar a few years ago on medication, and it was really well received. It was with Parkinson Canada. And so I think it's a really important point. So, stay tuned to the channel. I'll have um, some more dedicated things that I will go through my medications and what I take and what I don't take, and know that I'm not going to give medical advice, but I will tell you what I'm taking so that you can kind of look at me and feed yourself for your doctors. And that's a big point there, is that, and if you've been around the Parkinson community long enough, you hear a lot about advocacy. I can never say that word right. Advocacy. That sounds silly, but advocacy. Anyway, and the reality is the very first advocate that you have to be is for yourself, and with your medical teams, your health professionals, your doctors. You have to don't just take status quo. Like literally, I have a journal that I go through, and if I'm starting to feel different, anything different, I write it down. When it was, what it was, how long it lasted, or if it's still, to this day, still going on. And I share that with them, and I'm like, okay, so this was what's starting to happen. And then if it is a medication thing, then we adjust accordingly, and we try different things together. But if I just went in every day, and I know it's hard, especially, and no offense well, no, I know it's hard. When we go to the doctor, it's unbelievable. Everybody I talk to, it's like, why do we want to be our best at the doctor? And the tricks, right? The movement disorder specialist, the neurologist tricks. It's like, when I first went to the movement disorder specialist, it was the first time a doctor came out to the lobby to get me. Normally they just, the clerk or the nurse or whoever it might be will put you in a room and say, the doctor will be with you shortly. And I remember sitting in this waiting room, and I look up, and there's this fellow standing there and calling my name, and he's going to walk down the hallway with me. And I'm like, what is he doing? And, now, of course, we're wise to the tricks, because he's monitoring, watching, and studying your every move to see if your arm's swinging, to see what your balance looks like. And I appreciate them so much. But it's like, after a few times, I'm like, now I know why they come out there. I thought they were just super nice. I'm like, these neurologists and movement disorder specialists are the nicest doctors ever. They even come out and greet you and walk with you, and, like we're friends. And, but the gig's up. I got you, just kidding. But anyway, I say that to say this, that everything I do, I discuss with my doctor, and because the appointments are so sporadic, not sporadic, they're on time, but they're every 6 months. I mean, how the heck do you remember what you did, 5 months ago or something that happened? So I write it down. I keep it, a journal with me, and then when I get to the doctor, I just go through it. Hey, you know what? In January I was experiencing this, in February it kind of went away, and now it's back, and I go through the whole thing. And but if I tried to be all tough and cool and strong, like I know some of you try to do, and I've done too. Don't get me wrong, and I don't know why I've done it, but I literally, like, I don't want to make them. I don't want to look like I have this, right. So I'm doing everything I can do to hold my hand and make sure I'm not shaking, and try to get everything right, and kind of, how's it going? I'm doing great. Crack a joke, and then there's nothing wrong with cracking jokes, and having a great positive attitude and mindset. But the reality is, like, you have to be honest. You have to tell him or her, when you're feeling different, when things are just feeling different, and accordingly change. And some of the best advice I got, from a doctor, that I was on a panel with at a PDIQ event. I was moderating a panel with a movement disorder specialist, and she told me afterwards. She said, um, your progression progresses at the rate it's progressing, right? So, and I thought about that, and it's kind of hard, but your progression of this disease will progress at the same rate normally, 9 times out of 10, at the same rate that it has been progressing. So for me, there was like such this bright light of wow, okay, I'm doing the right things, because 15 years into this, have I progressed? Oh my God, I've progressed. Even even speaking. This is what you have to understand. When I've been filming videos or sitting here talking, it's one of those things. I'm like, oh boy, please, please, please last. Please, my voice, I can't project as much. That's why I'm trying to use a better mic to pick it up, because I have lost the ability to project in the air, and I lose my breath sometimes, and my memory recall is not that great. So I have, triggers to remind myself to what I wanted to talk about. In the past, I've been a speaker for a long time. I've spoken to people, like crowds of thousands of people, as I traveled across the United States and Canada, and putting on seminars and putting on conferences and speaking at conferences. So it was like my big thing. It was like my wheelhouse, things I love to do, the things I love to do. And now it's being robbed of me, right? So I had to adjust. I had to change that again, to get better mic, some cue cards, some things that'll trigger my memory to say, oh, don't forget to tell them this, oh, or say this, or hey, remember that story, it goes like this, because that memory recall is just an awful thing for me that, again, I had to adjust to. So there's some little nuggets and tips in there as well. It's like, do you have to cue yourself? Do you have to, like, whatever these little things are for you to do, to change and modify rather than stop? Because I'll be honest, I stopped speaking for a long time. I really did. I was like, no, that's it. I don't want to be made. I don't want to look like a fool. I don't want to be sitting there and can't recall a word, and look silly in front of people. And like, why would I want to embarrass myself like that? So I'm not going to do it at all. I'm just just gonna not do it. I'm gonna, and the reality. I said a lot, right? Reality, but the reality is that I enjoy doing it. I want to help people. I want to advocate. I want to get the word out. I want to encourage. I want to inspire. I want whatever I can do. I want to do it. So, I had to push myself. I had to take speech therapy. I had, like, which was, oh my gosh, I talked about that so many times, but it was amazing. Don't get me wrong. I am a huge advocate for speech therapy. And if you haven't taken speech therapy, and your partner or somebody in your life or people at work are saying, hey, I can't hear you anymore, or, hey, you're not talking loud enough, or all this kind of stuff, that's the first sign, like, right away. Because as Parkinson goes, and as it starts to progress, like, my wife will say, I'll say something, my wife will say, pardon me, like, what did you say? And I'll repeat it, thinking I'm talking louder, and she'll say, I still didn't get that. So I'll say it again, thinking I'm even louder. And the truth is, it's that she's still like, hey, you're not speaking any louder, but my brain is telling me I am. And it's just, it's crazy. But you have to adjust. So I went to speech therapy, and oh my goodness, like I said, just huge decibels back. And it's a funny little process on how to get there, but it works. And so, again, man, I'll go all over the place, don't I? But this is the format of what I'm doing here. The format is just to talk, share some stories, hopefully provide you some advice. Hopefully, maybe even talk about some of the things I did wrong and mistakes I made, so that you don't have to make them, and you can glean off that a little bit. So where were we now? When did I lose this meeting? When did this get out of hand? But anyway, I was talking about my job, and I had to change that or stop that, and then my marriage had to stop that, and again, both decisions at the time were awful, gut wrenching, my life is over type of decisions. And in both areas, it's just incredible what's happened to me and my journey. And I'm so happy. So, um, yeah. And we talk about golf too, but, that independence, I think about that too, like independence, because sometimes you have to ask for help, and that's not always easy. But here's the thing, like letting go doesn't mean giving up. Like I just said, it just means making room for what comes next. Say it again. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It just makes room for what's coming next. And that's so important. It's so, so important. So if you can remember that, that'd be great. Or rewind and write it down. But how about you? Have you had to stop doing something or adjust something like right away? I'd love to hear about that in the comments. If just I'd like to share. I'd like to be able to kind of go back and forth. But how about some things that I've had to change as well? And it kind of comes right back to that job. So when I left my work in 2021, I again was nervous. I knew it was the right thing to do, but I was obviously fearful and scared. That's over a year. I tried to find myself. What am I going to do? What can I do? How do I modify what I'm doing? And so I did a few things with Parkinson Canada. I did some webinars, and I did some radio interviews and some awareness during Parkinson's Awareness Month, which is usually it's in April of every year. So I was doing things like that, and I really started finding a sense of purpose because I would go to an event or speak at something or be on a webinar, and then I'd have one or two people just say, oh my gosh, I went through the same thing, and how did you deal with this, or how did you deal with that? And I'd give as much time as I could, and went through it, and I was like really feeling like, hey, if I'm doing some things that are okay, and my mind is I'm excited for the future now, because it's such an awful thing to go through and to try to adjust to, that if I can do anything to give back, I want to give back. And so it's led me in my career to starting at Parkinson Canada. I started there in 2022, and it gave me this really new sense of purpose, right? It was like totally different than what I'd done before, but it allowed me to use those experiences to help others. And that's been the biggest shift for me, is realizing that my career might look different, but it doesn't mean it's any less meaningful. Actually, it's way more meaningful. I've always had to change the way to approach my daily life. Before Parkinson's, I could just push through the day, right? But now I have to listen to my body. I have to plan all these things out, right? When I move, when I rest, what I ignore, otherwise I'm going to pay for it later, as I talked about. And my relationships, too, changed. Like, as divorced in 2021 or 22, I can't remember now exactly, but I just got married in 2024, and it was right around, it was just right around all these things. And this most incredible person, came into my life shortly after my divorce. And, but the truth is, I had to learn from my mistakes, and I had to learn, what my part of these decisions were. And I things were going to be different this time around. I wasn't, things were going to be really different. I had to be more open about my needs and my limitations and my reality. But I also had to realize and recognize that love can still thrive in the middle of uncertainty. And it really, really does. It's awesome. I'm so happy. And, and that's just me. That's, there's something that you've had to change to diagnose, but now it's thriving. It's different. Again, let me know. I'd love to hear, your stories. And mine's just a story. We all have stories. We all have stories. But again, what's changed? Sometimes you just have to adapt. Things that aren't going to go away, but you figure out how to live with them, or things that you want to always have in your life, just how to live with them. And really, you have to become okay with asking for help. And that's a tough one for me, because I've always been independent, right? Always independent, always did things. Parkinson's has taught me that sometimes you have to lean on others, and you have to be okay with it. And it is okay. And, you have to just let others help you as well, because for them it actually helps them, because people do want to help you and they don't want to help us, and a lot of times we're just we won't be honest or vulnerable enough to let them know that we need that help. And again, frustrating, I get it, totally get it. I mean, I'm looking out my window right now and there's a lot of snow, and I live in the middle of Canada, and it's been awfully cold and a lot of snow. And one of the things I had to give up was shoveling. And oh shoot, that was what I didn't mind giving up, to be honest. So I had to hire somebody to come and shovel my sidewalk and shovel my driveway. And um, at the beginning, it was like I did it because I just couldn't. I just didn't want to. Again, I didn't want to waste valuable time with my wife and my kids uh, being sore or tired because it snowed out and I had to go shovel. So I hired someone to do it, and at the beginning, it was really hard because I'd look out the window. I'm like, why am I paying someone to shovel? I could go out there and shovel. I could. And then there's always that fear of like, what do other people think about that? What do my friends think about that when they're, I'll talk to a friend or a family member, and I'm like, oh, what'd you do today? And they're like, oh my God, what do you mean? What everybody did? We spent the day digging out of this snowstorm and having to, to dig and snowblow for hours. And I go, and I'm thinking to myself, oh God, I didn't have to do that. And I'm happy. I'm glad, thankful I didn't. But then I was worried, like, what do they think? Maybe do they think I'm lazy? Do they think that I'm using this as an excuse? And you'll get kind of like hit with those thoughts, and they're awful thoughts, and they're terrible thoughts, and they're really not even logical thoughts. But all of a sudden you start hitting them. They'll be like, oh my God, maybe they think I'm lazy. Maybe they think, maybe I should just do it. Maybe I should, get rid of this person and just do it myself. And you have to get to that point that your life and your well-being and your happiness and your really good times are really important. They're so important. And I came to that mindset that the best days of the best days of my life are going to make up my best life. And I didn't want those best moments when I couldn't, you know, when I could be, I don't know, playing a game with my wife or watching a program or being on the deck and enjoying the sun. Uh, I waste that time being curled up in the corner because I was doing things that I shouldn't be doing. So, and that's the crazy thing too about Parkinson's, right? Because it's so unpredictable. It's just unpredictable. Some days are good, some days are bad, some days are, I don't know. You just wake up thinking, what the hell is this? But I've learned that I can't control everything, and what I can control though is how I respond to it and what I do and the actions behind it. So, the big thing about that is I really had to adapt my mindset. Parkinson's has taken things from me, but it's also forced me to slow down and to appreciate like the small things, right? And appreciate time and to focus on what really matters. I never would have chose this path, but I still make the most of it. I don't think well, who would? Nobody would choose this path. Nobody would choose this path. But we have it, and that's the reality. So I spent a lot of time asking why me, why this, like why, and I was trying to do all this knowledge, but I was trying to educate myself on it. Like, okay, my grandmother had Parkinson's, so what's the percentage of people living in Canada that they inherit this gene, and should I get testing here and testing there? And I was really, so I don't know what I thought I would learn, or why I don't know what I thought would feel better about having known how I got it, right? I played hockey growing up as a kid. I probably had, back in those days, in the 70s and early 80s, I probably had a million concussions, and undiagnosed, unlooked at. And so could it be that? Could it have been that? If I didn't play hockey, it's something that I really enjoy. If I didn't play hockey, maybe I wouldn't have this, or, things like that. And so but it's almost debilitating. That's that mindset I had to change. My mindset I had to change was, it at this point, sure, do I want to know? Yeah, it's nice to know, and eventually, whatever, maybe I will, but I don't want to spend my life trying to dig into the why. I want to spend the rest of the good days of my life is living, right? And that's why I call this doing life today. Like, do life today. Don't just live life. Do it. Do it to the extreme. Do things that you never dreamed of. And so, when I say all that, and I just said previous to that I've had to learn how to slow down, that's probably been one of the hardest things for me, because I was always I was like a pinball. I just bam, bam, bam. I'd be flying all over the place, doing a million things at once at top notch speed. Um, and slowing down to me was always I always equated it to laziness or um, uninspired or not passionate. And so it took me a long time to realize, well, number one is it took me a long time. Like I was slowing down regardless, but I had to literally slow myself down at the same time. I had to slow my mind down to match my body, if that made sense. And then I had to slow my body down to match my mind because with this Parkinson thing is that I do these, these, I don't know if you've seen them before or if you watch them, hopefully you do, and hopefully you don't mind them, but I do a daily kind of hopefully motivational, maybe funny thing about Parkinson's every morning. It's just one of those things that I like to start my day off with, just thinking about something that I can make fun of or because then if I make fun of it or I kind of put it in its place, it doesn't seem as powerful, right? Like I'll do one about walking, hey, I wanted to go walking, but my foot wouldn't listen to my brain, or my brain and my feet were having an argument, or spilling my coffee, and things that would frustrate me. I kind of look at them and try to make fun of them. And then I feel like I take the power back from that Parkinson's has. Parkinson's doesn't have the power over me, right? I have it, but it doesn't have power over me. I mean, it's controlling sometimes my brain and what I'm doing, but it's again how I'm going to react to it and how I'm going to deal with it and what my mood's going to be like at the end. And um, I'm going to go down smiling, man. I'm going to go down smiling. So, and I hope you do too. And I hope you're getting something out of this. I really, really do. And I'm thankful that you're listening. And we've got some exciting things that I'm working on that are going to be coming out here. And I'm going to keep doing these podcasts. Obviously, that again, by that response rate, it was well received. And I hope that, I hope that you continue on this journey with me. And I want to go on that journey with you as well. So, make sure you reach out, put things in the comments. And I want you to remember this though. At the end of the day, Parkinson's is like a masterclass in change, and it forces us to stop, to change, to adapt, but it also teaches us resilience. So if you're struggling with that change right now, I want you to know this. You're not alone. You just because life looks different than you expected doesn't mean that it can't still be meaningful. So if this episode resonated with you, please take a moment to like and comment and subscribe, and let's keep the conversation going. And I'm going to see you on the next one of these Living Life with Parkinson's, the good, the bad,